I really enjoyed this episode with Ross Brodar, and he's somebody who's worked extensively as a locations manager on films like ANORA and Marty Supreme, and a lot of other films that are in the pipeline that are about to come out from directors like Sean Durkin and James Gray. And we talk a lot about filmmaking and scouting locations and collaborating with directors. But the conversation also gets into an unbelievable documentary that he directed called The Linchpin of Bensonhurst, which tells the story of Dominic Montiglio, who was a Vietnam vet and former associate of the DeMeo crew that was part of the Gambino crime family. And just what fascinated me about Ross is that he's one of those rare people that feels like he's lived multiple lives, from working at the Roseland in New York City to his art and acting and filmmaking and wild New York stories like collecting money for a fish market back in the day to being roommates with Dominic Montiglio. So just a fascinating guy to listen to, and it ended up being one of those episodes where it feels less like an interview and more just sitting in a room and hearing incredible stories unfold. So I really appreciate Ross having taken the time to come onto the show, and I think you guys will enjoy this one as well.
You are now listening to the Film Situation podcast.
I'm excited to talk to you, Ross. Welcome to the Film Situation.
Thanks for having me, Zeph.
So I guess, how did you first get into film and the world of production?
Well, it goes back quite a ways, really. I got into acting when I was late teens. I went to Lee Strasberg Theater.
Oh,
I
wow.
did
It's an
Broadway
acclaimed
stuff.
theater. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did a bunch of off-Broadway stuff, and I did some small films and stuff like that. And during that time, I kind of realized that in order to be an artist as an actor, I needed a lot of people. It's hard to just do monologues in your room, right? And I kind of segued from that into painting, and got out of it for a few years. And then when I was about 26, a buddy of mine named Anthony Katagis, who's actually a big producer in the film business, he and I decided, let's make a film ourselves. And we went to a friend of mine who was a bit older. His name was Ken Van Sickle. He had been actually nominated for his cinematography in a movie called Marjo with Carol Kane. And I said, I want to make this movie. Would you shoot it for me? He said, yeah. We did it on Super 16, and we made a film that actually was about 20 some odd minutes. It went to the IFFM that showed at the Angelica in the 90s, and people kind of liked it and thought it was really interesting. And so from there, Anthony went straight into wanting to be a producer. I wanted to still do the acting thing and kind of put on the director's hat and see where I could take it, because I had directed and acted in Screwdriver. And that was kind of my first taste of it. And then as Anthony got more and more into production, he started sort of saying to me, Ross, the city so well, like better than anybody. Why don't you start scouting? And I started scouting many years ago, and I scouted for a good 10 years before I decided to actually take it more seriously, get into management, and kind of get into the DGA and go for it as a career.
I see you still have acting credits. You're still pretty active as far as making cameos here and there. You still have the bug?
I think I'm going to be like the king of the 30-second to a minute cameo clip, dude. And I don't really care, because for me, it's like this. Acting's one of those things. You see so many people, even like really quite good actors, they show up on set for a day or 2 days. If they're not like the lead actor, you're just a little hit here, a little hit there.
Yeah.
So whether you got one line or 10 lines, for me, it's like to get into the film at this point and to be a part of it is kind of like fun, but it's also like I've been in SAG 18 years, and I'm just trying to keep it's just a gig, I just trying to keep my sort of, pension going with it. And I'm hoping when I cash out and I hopefully make it into my late 70s, I have a pension both with SAG and the DGA. I'm not trying to be a movie star. I don't care really. It's more about like, I have an agent. If I get auditions and I make it, beautiful. When I meet directors and I'm doing location management and they get to know me and they're like, yo, we want to throw you in the film and we want to throw you a cameo, beautiful. I just kind of take it as it comes. And that looseness about it has made it, sort of happen.
Awesome. And where'd you originally grow up, Ross?
I grew up in Little Neck, Great Neck.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Island. Yeah.
I just had somebody on the podcast that he did a documentary about Andy Kaufman, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess from watching his documentary, that's where Andy Kaufman first got started, is in Great Neck. There was like a comedy club, I guess, in Great Neck.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I was surprised to see that. I used to actually hang out in Great Neck. There's a Peter Luger's over there, right?
Yeah. There's a Peter on Northern Boulevard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And were you involved? Were you kind of? I see the tattoos and stuff like that. Were you like ever in the music scene or like anything like that? Were you going to like see bands or anything like that, like in the city or like?
Well, I worked at Roseland Ballroom for 7
you worked at the Roseland?
I worked at the Roseland. I was in
That's
the
where
VIP for 7 years, bro.
No way. That's my first concert was at the Roseland. I saw the band Rancid when I was 14 years old at Roseland.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was like one of the first shows that I went to, and I remember Joey Ramone was there, and I was like, oh shit, Joey Ramone from the Ramones is right in front of me, like, you know what I mean, like.
Yeah. No, I was, I love the music scene in New York when it was CBGBs and Roseland and all those type of club, Palladium and stuff like that. And
I used
yes,
to go to CBGBs a lot too. In the 90s.
Yeah, it was great, and
it was like
yes,
hardcore shows.
For some time, I was in a band with a couple friends of mine that were artists, and we kind of, used to have this little avant-garde band and played at Don Hills and some other places around, Manhattan. I wouldn't say I was like really deep in it. I just kind of fucked around with it, and for many years, art was just the thing I pursued. Making music, making paintings, acting, making films, like. That was just kind of what I was doing for a long time.
Nice. I guess first talking about your locations work a little bit. What's for people that are not in the film industry, how do you usually describe your work as a locations manager?
I've been really blessed to work with a lot of really great directors who see me as a collaborator. And so, because of that, I see my role as reading a script, understanding what it is that it's written, and then trying to find that thing or sometimes bringing to the table something maybe that isn't exactly there, but maybe fits and throwing some ideas out as a collaborator and seeing where that lands with a director. And, you spend a lot of time in pre-productions with the director, driving around, looking at places, showing them pictures from your scouts, scouting yourself, etc. So, like I said, I see myself as a collaborator. It's a lot of fun because you really feel like you're part of the filmmaking process. You really handle so many of the logistics, from the parking, to the permitting process, to making deals at the locations, to managing the locations. All of that stuff, you kind of play an integral part, you and your team. And of course, that's the component is I always, I've been lucky to really hire really good people to work with me. And, you're as good as your team. So, it's just a really good part of being a collaborator is being a location manager.
What's one of the most difficult sort of locations to search for that might not be obvious?
Well, colleges are a pain in the ass, hospitals, places where there's a bureaucratic system that's set in place is really difficult because, you have to deal with so many different entities to try to get what you need for the director and for the production. So it's tough. It's better when you're dealing with like, business owners that I don't want to say just mom and pop, but like when you're dealing with the owner, themselves or, a specific management team of a location, you have a lot better luck than dealing with corporate entities or bureaucratic entities.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would imagine airports are probably pretty difficult as well.
Super difficult.
Yeah. And what's this question comes from my friend Eric Freitas, who actually works in locations, who's been a guest on the podcast. What is the most annoying note a director can give a location manager when searching?
The most annoying note. Well, you know what it is?
I would imagine it's something budget related, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
like we
funny
want
that you say
everything and
that.
we want it for nothing, right? I'm sure there's stuff like that.
Well, yeah, sometimes it's like they're going to ask you something that's so far beyond the budget, obviously,
Yeah.
but they want you to find it anyway. Or one of the most annoying things is when you get a no, a solid no, and you're like, it's no, and they keep sending you back to the same place to see if you could finagle it.
Yeah.
And I won't say it's annoying because truthfully, like any good location manager, myself and all the good ones I've known, we're really good at turning no's to yeses, right? We find a way to make it a yes. But sometimes it's a hard no and they're just like not willing to let it go. And yeah, that could be, kind of tough. Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of tough. So you were the location manager on Marty Supreme, which was incredible, by the way. And just also really interesting use of locations because it was a period piece movie. And so you're seeing different locations in a dynamic way, like that you wouldn't have normally seen. Like what was it like working on that?
Well, I was one of the location managers. The actual supervising location manager was a guy named Matt Kenya. And I was the location manager as well. My like swath of the movie was mostly the New York stuff, the Lower East Side stuff,
That was some of the best stuff. Yeah. It was great.
and a big farm out in Jersey where that whole scene happens with the cornfield and the shooting and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, it was all great. It was just I appreciated it just from having spent so much time in the Lower East Side. So it was cool to see it in that kind of way from back in the day, like, that kind of thing.
No, it's great. I mean, you look for the bones, you look for the bones of a street that feels like it could be turned into something from the 50s, and you work with a team of very, experienced people like Jack Fisk, who was on that, who is the production designer. Yeah. He's a legend. And, you work with an art department and all these people that like see that they could build the facades from an area that you're showing them. Yeah. And then you've got to get everybody sort of on board to be willing to allow you to go do that and take over their block and take over their store for a certain amount of time. And so there's a lot that goes into it, and it's quite expensive, and you have to be super strategic because you got to try to give everybody a similar amount of money, because if they start talking and one's getting way more than the other guy, then he comes back to you, why is this guy getting that and I'm getting this? And then it can get out of hand. Yeah. So deals have to be strategic, and the way you manage it has to be strategic. And then certainly working with the mayor's office, of course, to shut it down for a certain amount of time to shoot on it is also another, element and strategy you got to, work into the program.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I saw you also worked on ANORA. That was also a great film as well. So you worked on so many great projects.
Yeah, ANORA was great.
Was that?
And ANORA was just myself, my assistant location manager, who was Ben Wiseman, and we had a unit PA, Jackson Griffith, and that was just the three of us on that movie.
Nice.
So most of the time on these movies, I have like a couple ALMs, about 4 different location assistants, a couple unit PAs, and a location coordinator and all that. On ANORA, I was the location coordinator, I was the manager, I was the scout, I did a lot. So, but collaborating with Sean was amazing. And that's another example, like, the strip club that I found didn't even have stripper poles, but I showed it to Sean because I just thought it was super cool. Yeah. It reminded me of like this old school brothel vibe, and he loved it. And that's like another one of those, like, you can work with a director who's really open, and then they love something you bring them, and it helps change the dynamic of the movie.
Have you ever had a location that completely fell apart at the last minute? And like, how do you recover in a situation like that?
Well, I've never really had it happen to me where like last minute, meaning like, we were going to show up that morning or that day and suddenly we couldn't get in.
Yeah.
That's never happened to me because I refuse to allow that to happen. I've had locations fall through that we've scouted, tech scouted, thought we were going to shoot at, and suddenly either the owner changes their mind or they want 5 times as much money or something like that. And the way you deal with it is you always have a plan B. Like you always have your list of locations and the ones that were chosen by the director and production designer that they agreed on, but there was always a list of 5 of them. So you always should have the second one in your pocket too, and a deal kind of laid out to be like, hey, if this doesn't work out, we could always pivot and go to this.
Now, do different directors have like a different way of interfacing with the location manager, or is it pretty much uniform kind of like?
No,
how would you describe working with different directors? I guess
they're all kind of different. I mean, guys like Sean Baker and Josh Safdie are like really the type of guys that sort of like do a lot of research ahead of time and give you tons of reference things like that. Even James Gray was very much like that.
James Gray is awesome. Like I love his work. I don't know him personally, but
I just did a movie with James Gray with Paper Tiger, and like, so there's guys like that. These guys are like cinephiles that like, have such a catalog in their mind, and then they have so much knowledge of just architecture and references of and history and things. So they give you a lot to work off of, and they kind of talk you through it. And then other directors sometimes give you a little more like, hey, this is basically what I'm looking for. Show me what you think works, or show me what you think we could afford. Because sometimes their vision is like, grand, but they don't have the money to make that vision. So they say to you, show me what you think we could do that is comparable within the budget we have and within the world we can create. And I like working with both, but I really enjoy more like working with guys like Josh and Sean and James and people that and I just did this one with Sean Dirk and Deep Cuts, which was really cool too, because Sean was all, the thing with Sean was he wrote it down, it's on the page, and he kind of was like, let's figure out what we can do and make it as close to what I've written as possible. And he was super flexible and like kind of, malleable. And that's a good quality to have when you're working with a director, because if they get too rigid and you can't find that thing and they get stuck on it, it could be, difficult.
That makes sense. Also, shout out to George Beno, my good friend George, that introduced Ross and I, and that also worked on Deep Cuts as well.
Yep.
Are there ever instances where you're sort of surprised in a positive way with what the director and the production designer have like transformed a practical environment, let's say like an apartment, like, wow, like this really, looks a lot more dynamic now that we're shooting in here, that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, I mean, I got to say, so many of the teams I've worked with have had great production designers, and it's amazing what they can all do with so little sometimes, or even when they have a lot, the vision that they create. I've been super impressed with a bunch of them.
Nice. I saw that earlier on in your acting career, you were in the James Gray movie We Own the Night as Tattooed Man.
Yeah, I've been in 3 of James Gray's movies for like that quick. I was the Tattooed Man when Joaquin Phoenix looks in and sees like this tattooed guy sitting in a warehouse. It's a quick that long. Yeah. I was an immigrant screaming off of a roof. It was that long. And now I'm in Paper Tiger. There, you'll see a scene where I don't want to say what it is, but you'll see me, and it's just like that. So, yeah, James likes throwing me in for like 0.2 seconds. It's great.
It's awesome. I love We Own the Night. I thought that was a great.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
So I want to talk a little bit about your documentary, The Linchpin of Bensonhurst, which is a fascinating story.
Well, the Linchpin of Bensonhurst is, the kind of thing that was super organic. It happened by chance, really. I met Dominic by chance at a gallery. I was working as a bartender at his buddy's place in downtown at an Italian restaurant called Barolo. And his buddy, Richie Emilo, who had grown up with him in Brooklyn, said, my friend Dominic's in town and he's showing some artwork. And why don't we go check it out? I think you guys would hit it off because he knew I was a painter too. And to make a long story short, because I've told that story many times of how I met Dom and all that, but through circumstances, Dominic ended up living in my art studio. He was a broken down war vet painter who had this crazy background of being a gangster. And when he moved into my studio, because he was trying to get away from this crazy girlfriend he had asked me to stay for a couple weeks till he could figure his shit out. And those 2 weeks turned into almost 3 years. And as his story unfolded and as I understood who he really was, and, that there was a book written about him and that, he was kind of this like legendary gangster figure, I just made a deal with him one day and was like, look, man, if you want to get your story out there, because you see, this was just before the internet exploded. So, he wanted to get his story out there because people made all kinds of assumptions and judgments about his life and who he was and called him a rat and all this stuff. And they just didn't know his story, like from start to finish. There was Murder Machine was written and it was only about, a chunk of his life that had to do with Vietnam and coming home and being a gangster, and flipping on his uncle. But I got the full story from birth until, there he was in my studio as a painter, and what happened in his life and like how he became who he was and what the circumstances were, etc. And so we made a deal that he could live in my studio and he was going to give me the life rights to his film. And we were going to do this real raw documentary. And I have a friend, Billy Sharp, who's also the co-director and the editor of Linchpin and Bensonhurst, who we had done a bunch of stuff together. And Billy was like, yo, I got the equipment, man. Let me come over and let's just start filming. We didn't know which way it was going to go. Let's just put a camera on him and start getting stories. And then at night, even when you're hanging out late and drinking with him, throw the camera on and just start capturing shit. Because, Dom and I could sit for hours and smoke weed and get drunk and talk shit and make painting. And that's what we did. And as that happened, it kind of the years went on and we started getting all this juicy stuff. And then I met Frank Pergola, the cop that arrested him. And I met Art Ruffles, who was part of the FBI task force. And I met his ex-girlfriend and I met his family. I met this one and that one and the guys he was in Vietnam with. And it went on and on. And it, people don't realize that film took almost 12 years to put it all together, because every time we thought we had a cut, we'd meet somebody else and then we'd add on to it. So, it's kind of it was just serendipity how that kind of came to be.
Can I play a clip, like a 10-second thing? Hold on.
Was that no matter what, I was going to get kind of sucked into that life, because especially when I got back from Vietnam, I did the music thing, I went to college, I did all of this. Well, I always knew that it was almost like a thing in your heart where you feel that if you didn't do it, you were letting down the family. And when I say I was the last one, I was the last Sicilian in my family. And the Gambino family is the only family out of all the 26 families in the country that, to be a boss, to be a lieutenant, a capo, You have to be Sicilian. You know, it's the only Sicilian thing. When he was 6 years.
So I thought that was just a really interesting kind of concept of fate that ties into the mentality that he grew up in, this sort of fatalistic approach of life.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, many people have challenged that being true about the Sicilian thing. Like, that was Dom saying that, but like, it's not necessarily the truth. You have to be a Sicilian and all that, because there was, you know, Napolitans and all kinds of different gangsters from different parts of Italy, and you know,
it might have been the truth as he knew it, as he came to know it, you know, because
right, it was
like
truth.
Word on the street was like, if everybody tells him that that's what's true, then to him, that's probably what felt to be true.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that with Dom where it's, you know, it's kind of subjective a little bit and to his world. But yeah, I mean, look, he grew up like that. I mean, he grew up, you know, with generations of gangsters.
Yeah, it's more that that's the part of it that kind of really struck me, was more so than the Sicilian thing, just the generations of gangsters, because I actually knew a Sicilian kid from my neighborhood in the Bronx, and his brother, who had sadly got murdered and was a gangster. He like this guy went back home to Sicily, and he was studying to be a lawyer and stuff. And they had pictures of his brother up on the wall, like, you know what I mean? They were like, "Wow, your brother, he was really doing something." You know what I mean? What the hell are you doing with your life? You know, like, and I'm like, this guy is studying to be a lawyer. Like, what are they talking about? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you're revering the brother that got killed as a hero, like, and this kid's trying to do something with his life, and they're treating him like a bum. Like, I don't know if he was like being tongue in cheek or kind of joking, but like, I think he kind of wasn't.
Never know.
You never know. That's also what struck me with this sort of thing, is like, hey, like, that's, you know, a character like Dom growing up in that world. Like, clearly, if he grew up like some of his Vietnam buddies, like in the Midwest, and like a totally different normal family, like, I'm sure his life would have been radically different. Clearly.
Clearly.
You know? So yeah, it was a really interesting story. I've already recommended it to a bunch of friends of mine that are into this kind of stuff, you know, and a lot of people are. Like, a lot of people have a fascination with this because it's such a, well, number one, it's something almost like a cinematic sort of thing. So even if you don't revere that way of life, there's still something really interesting about it, no matter what.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, if you go to our YouTube page and you look at the comments, I mean, there's so many comments like, God, if only Scorsese had heard about Dominic instead of Henry Hill. Because, like, compared to Henry Hill, I mean, Henry Hill was a coffee boy compared to Dominic.
Right.
I mean,
100%.
you know, Henry Hill didn't really do shit. They, you know, made up whatever. They, you know, he was involved in a couple things, but like,
he was never even a made guy. Henry Hill was just an associate that was, you know, which I don't know. It was interesting. Yeah, it was Dominic's story is really
the
fascinating.
thing about Dominic's story is that what's fascinating is you got to understand, like, Dom wasn't made either, but Dom was sitting in for his uncle who was a captain a lot.
Yeah.
And his uncle would go down to Florida and put Dom in the position to have to collect from Roy DeMeo and be involved with the DeMeo crew and all these guys, you know. And so Dom was in positions that he should have never been in one regard. And then on the flip side of it, it's like, you know, it's like Shakespeare. I mean, you know, his uncle Nino threw his father out of the family, took Dom under his wing to raise him, to use him for, you know, what he was good at when he got back from Vietnam, knowing that, you know, he had 96 kills over there, and kind of groomed him to be his fucking errand boy, right? And only for then to Dom, you know, not listen to Nino and kind of rebel against Nino, and Nino tried to fucking kill him and misses, and then Dom flips on him and Nino ends up dying in prison. I mean, it's got all the elements of Shakespeare and kind of this kind of betrayal and familial stuff. And then after that, the guy wanders the country, gets kicked out of the, you know, witness protection program, and ends up an artist making paintings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and making music and shit like that. It's just like, you can't make this stuff up.
I
That's why I
know.
was telling, I was telling George and how I kind of got, if I could ever get this to Stallone, it's everything he's ever done. Stallone,
Yeah.
Rambo, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Stallone's a painter. Stallone's doing Tulsa King. He's a mob, plays the mobster. Stallone did a movie where he was a singer. Like everything that Dominic was, Stallone acted as. So his interest and Italian American and all that stuff, like, and the underdog and shit. I don't know.
It's one of
know
those
there's somebody
dude,
out there that's gonna
it's
love
one of
this.
those stories that it's definitely like, okay, like this is when real life is crazier than fiction, because it's a true story that is so crazy that it would sound made up if somebody didn't know better,
Right.
Like if
That's what I
somebody
mean.
wrote this as
Wouldn't
a
even believe
fiction,
me.
yeah, if somebody wrote this as a fiction book, they'd be like, oh, okay, this is too outlandish. It's like, no, this is true. So that's what's really fascinating about it.
Exactly.
And just there were so many parts that unraveled, like when he went to California, like that whole stuff, like people just have to see this doc. It's really a recommend.
Yeah, and lots of people just are like completely like shocked when they see the doc and they hear you went to fucking, because I used to say, like, you went to California, you were running, doing burglaries with Crips and what, and getting arrested, just the weird, crazy shit Dom got himself into. But if you knew Dom, you knew that. I mean, I always equate Dom to the movie Big Fish. Do you ever see Big Fish?
Yes, the Tim Burton movie written by John August. I was just reading that screenplay actually recently because
So
it's a
at the
good
end,
screenplay.
all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you'd see the twins, and you see the odd guy, and you see all the weird characters that he always talked about that everybody
Yeah.
thought he was making it up. Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of dumb. It's like it sounds so outrageous, and maybe he's full of shit, and he's half drunk, and he's on meds, and whatever. But then I speak to his Vietnam buddies, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Dom did this, Dom did that. Oh yeah, let me show you an article where Dom, stopped a fucking ambush that had been getting all these guys killed, and there was a woman with a fucking oxen who was signaling the VC, and Dom ran in there and fucking like did all this heroic shit, and or the stuff that happened in the street that Frank Pergola corroborated or Art Ruffles corroborated, that people are like, they don't know. They think they
Yes.
know Dominic because they read something. They don't know how many stories he has. And I always say this, you have to remember, like, you really think when they catch a criminal and the criminal cops to their shit, like, let's even talk about Sammy, right?
Yeah.
Sammy copped to 19 murders. You think he gave him everything?
Clearly.
No,
Clearly
you know what I'm
not.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
these guys aren't that deeply involved in shit and give up everything. There's always more.
Always more. I think 50 Cent said that somewhere where he was like, somebody might get caught for a felony, but that person might be committing 365 felonies a year. They get caught for one of them, but they're committing 365 felonies a year.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. And so maybe the cops can tie him to like 5-6 things, so they cop to it. But they're
Yeah.
not going to cop to fucking all the other ones. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah.
But you got to be smart enough to understand, like, you can't stand around these type of murderers and criminals and not put in work, because they're not gonna with you or respect you.
So for people not familiar, the crew that he was a part of, the DeMeo crew with the Gemini Lounge, that was an infamous, really, really like amongst like the mafia. That was one of the most violent crews, if not the most violent one by far. And
Oh yeah.
one thing I'm curious about too is I first actually heard about it from the Iceman documentaries, I think, from Richard Kuklinski. Do you remember those on HBO? Did you ever watch that?
Yeah.
Did Dominic ever, is that somebody you ever
Oh, that's all
crossed paths-
bullshit.
Oh, it's all
that's
bullshit? Yeah.
Oh, you got it. So when you get a chance, go on to Dominic Montiglio, The Life, and look up the Kuklinski. We called it the Iceman Melteth or something, that session, because
Yeah.
we had Dominic and Frank Pergola talking about it.
Yeah.
Basically, Frank Pergola was called in by HBO to corroborate the story and told them, this is all bullshit.
All,
I
wow.
interviewed Kuklinski in jail. Kuklinski had no idea the caliber of the bullet that was used to kill Roy DeMeo. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what was in the trunk with him. Oh, there was a lot of shit that Kuklinski made up. He said he killed Roy DeMeo. They know he didn't kill Roy DeMeo.
Yeah.
All right. And Kuklinski claimed that Roy asked him to do all these hits. The truth was, Kuklinski was getting extorted by Roy.
Got you.
Kuklinski had like a porn thing that was going on that got mixed up with Roy's stuff, and they were extorting him. Kuklinski, why would Roy DeMeo with fucking the DeMeo crew and all these killers hire this Polish guy?
Yeah, and I was wondering about that especially after watching your documentary. I was like, why? It's like
No, they no. You got to watch it, and that's what was funny is that I don't want to say names, but the people at HBO didn't listen to Frank because they wanted to make their documentary because it was entertainment, but it was mostly bullshit. I mean, did Kuklinski kill some people? Yeah. Did he was a hitter to a certain extent? Yeah, but not to the extent he made it up. And if you listen to Dominic and Frank talk about it, it's fascinating because Dom even says that Kuklinski one time came by the Gemini Lounge to buy a gun from Joey or something. Like,
gotcha. So they knew him,
like,
but
they knew him, but he was like
low level sort of.
Yeah, it was like a low level guy that just was in the wings that he was hoping that they weren't going to fucking put a bullet in his head one day. And from what they were saying, Roy was actually getting money from him.
Interesting. So yeah, I had a feeling there. I mean, like clearly he was talking about killing Jimmy Hoffa and shit like that in his documentary. So like, you know, this some things were full of shit, but like I didn't realize like because I was pretty young, I think, when I first watched it. So it was.
Oh, I watched it too before I met Dominic, and then when I met Frank and them, and then we talked about it, they were like, Frank gave me this whole thing. He was super pissed at HBO, and he was like, these fucking idiots, how they did that, it was so fraudulent. We had proved that Kuklinski was lying time and again.
Wow.
And he went into their offices to be like, no, I'm not going to corroborate and be in your show. You really have no right to even put this out there. The guy's a fucking liar.
Yeah. He was just chasing some sort of notoriety. He's already doing
listen, a lot of these guys, you put a camera on them, they'll just talk and talk and talk. And, you know, they're super charismatic. And, you know, if you're in jail doing life, I mean, why not beef up your fucking story? What do you got to lose, you know?
Yeah. That's wild, man. It's crazy. Yeah. And then there's other guys that they've done more stuff and they probably downplay it.
Right.
There's definitely people like that too, you know?
100%.
You know?
100%.
And what was Dominic like as a roommate? Like you lived with him. Like what was he?
I mean, man, like Dom, I mean, we had tons of great laughing, goofy times. We had tons of fun. But Dom was a handful, man. I mean, he had PTSD.
Yeah.
He had a drinking problem. He had a smoking problem. You know, he had just.
Were you ever
on.
I mean, were you ever concerned? Like this dude was like a like, you know, he had a reputation of being a cold-blooded killer. Were you ever concerned at times? Like, all right, like this guy could snap or anything like that?
No. People don't understand. Like Dom was, you know, they think like the guy was a killer that he'd like turn around and like murder his friend or like murder the guy that you like because I offended him or something or pissed him off. Like, no, we were really tight friends and I trusted Dom completely. You know, Dom wasn't like like a lot of these guys, they're not like maniac killers. They like Dom put it, we kill each other. They're in the mob. They're playing a game within their world. So like killing each other is the game they're playing. But they're not just going out and murdering people because they get mad or something like that. He tells this story in our movie where they just shot Vinnie Mook and they get in the car and somebody's honking and Nino says, you think if this guy knows what we just did, he'd be fucking honking that horn? And Roy goes, I'll get out and shoot him right now, Nino. And then Nino's like, no, don't get out of the car. He's just honking his horn.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
those are great stories.
In other words, we don't do that, right? Like that's not what those guys are about. So no, I was never scared about that. But Dom's biggest problem was just like drinking too much. Like early on, he left the house a couple times. He came home one night, fucking all beat to shit, teeth missing. You know, some guys tried to jump him, take his wallet. They couldn't, obviously.
Yeah.
He was like, see, they didn't get my wallet, but he was drunk and staggering. So I had to make it a rule, like, you can't leave the house. You got to stop drinking. You got to slow this down. Like, because, you know, I knew that he also, like, had a fucking bounty on his head.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like we had to be a bit organized about it when he was staying with me, like how he would behave. But Dom respected me after not long, and we had a really good friendship and understanding about what we were doing together. And, you know,
That's a movie I definitely want to see come to fruition. I'll be the first one in line to see it.
yeah, man. Well, you know, tell everybody you can about it.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I mean, I've been trying to get Chaz Palminteri, you know, get to people that know him. I've been trying to, Joe Rogan mentioned it, Murder Machine on a podcast. Like, there's some big podcasters that if I could get on their show and talk to them about the movie, I think I could get that much more people to, you know, kind of.
No, I could really see it. You know, there's sometimes people sort of talk about kind of an idea, and I'm like, all right, like, you know, anything could be a great film if it's done the right way. But this is one that I'm like, no, this needs to be
Right.
Yes, this needs to be a
Yeah,
film.
no, but those are the comments. Like, why is this not a film? Like, this
Yeah.
needs to get made. Look at the comments. You'll laugh. You're like, holy shit. I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah, no, this needs
No-brainer.
to be a film for sure. I guess one more question that I have about it is you must have had so much material. It must have been tough to edit that doc because you probably had so much material that we're like, we can't even squeeze it into this hour and a half long.
That's absolutely true. We actually have a bunch of material we never released. Him talking about things that nobody knows about yet.
Yeah.
We're saving it.
Yeah.
So in other words, you know, we're waiting for the right producer to get involved, to share a whole bunch more. So when we come out with it, there's some stuff nobody's heard. You understand? Like, we knew, we were kind of new to do that.
Sure.
And there's some really fascinating, mind-blowing stories that are yet to come out that we want to wait, because there's a lot of production value in that helps for the value of me selling the life story, that it's not just the stuff that's already on the internet, but I got more, you know?
Yeah.
Help the writer that gets involved. Because I see this thing as a series.
It definitely could be. There's so many parts of it. Just like even like in your doc, like the California sequence with the company that he formed and the van. Like, it was just so
pest control. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like I just got to get the right
pest
people
control
together.
is so cinematic.
Yeah, man. We're going to get the right people together. And the thing is, like, you know, right now there's that guy, William DeMeo. He's got Gravesend. And
yeah.
And he's got like every gangster guy that ever played a role in a gangster movie,
Right.
and whatever. And I'm not trying to knock him, because I've spoken to the guy, and it's impressive that he did that. Like, he created this, he produced it, he wrote it. Like,
It
he
is
got
impressive.
actors. Like, he deserves his props. So I'm not knocking him. But what I want to do, I really want to cast it with people that haven't been in those roles.
Yeah.
Right. I want it to be completely new in that regard, so that, like, new faces, new actors, you know, a story that hasn't been told yet comes to life in a way that hadn't before. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I think even like the success of The Sopranos, that's why there were so many guys in there that hadn't acted before or had little bit things, and then suddenly got their shot, or however you want to look at it. And it brought it all to life. It was this incredible cast and incredible writers and the storytelling. This thing's got all the hallmarks of being that. But, like, you know, being in the film business, it's like I see it from a complete, you know.
Oh, definitely. Like you said earlier, it's almost Shakespearean in its level of dramatic intrigue. And somebody like Dominic, it wasn't like he was a one-dimensional guy. Clearly, it wasn't just like, okay, he was like this like mobbed up gangster. Like, there was the whole Vietnam aspect. The fact that he was like a successful, like bordering on a successful singer earlier, like and
A
that
doo-wop
was
singer,
the
dude.
doo-wop singer was fascinating. It
He
was
was
like
a
what?
doo-wop
Like
singer.
yeah,
Yeah, he was.
that was really
He
incredible.
he was out in Berkeley doing music, right?
Yeah,
He was in Vietnam. He was he was a gangster. He was selling drugs in fucking Studio 54. He was out in LA doing the crazy shit with those guys, being a robbery stick up dude and drug. I mean, he was just did so many things, you know? It's like
yeah. And then when he was even talking about the protest, or when he went to California, he's like, "Yeah, people have a right to protest." He's like, "It's only when they cross this line that I thought it was too much, but other than that,
right when they burn the flag, he's like
when they
"That's-
burned the right when they burned the
I'm gonna
flag," and
fucking
it was
go
like
with
it was
the
interesting
crowd."
to hear just like his philosophical viewpoints on things as well. You know,
Or how about when he roams the country under like fucking 10 different aliases? He's got no job experience. He's got no real way to make a living, right?
yeah,
And he's just bouncing around from town to town under these weird names, trying to fucking make it, right? Like that whole montage of
that was
life
incredible. Yeah,
out in the middle of nowhere and I mean it's interesting, man. And when I met him, it was like he you know, and I said like, how the fuck are you so you got no money, you got not like, you know, he's like, Ross, I never was able to put a dime together afterwards because I had no real fucking experience. And I was all fucked up and his drinking was a huge problem.
yeah,
And he'd blow up his you know, he'd go to bars, he'd talk shit, he'd tell everybody who he is, they had to move him out of there. And
yeah,
he'd go over here and big problem over here, move him out of there. And you know, like, because Dom was kind of like a bull in a china shop. Wherever you put him, he could destroy everything around him.
right,
Something.
right. I was just thinking those guys that were trying to take his wallet, like had just no fucking clue, like whose wallet they were trying to take. You know?
Well, you want to hear the best, Zeph? So there was a time in my life when I knew Dom, I was collecting money for a fish market. And I had an alias. My alias was Gus Valentine,
Yeah.
and my company was Relentless Recovery. And Dom
like
comes
that.
into my life, and I'm like, yo, part of how I make my money is I bartend and I collect money for this fish market. So he's like, let me go with you, you know? Now, Dom's older now. He's an old Vietnam vet. He's got his Vietnam hat on or whatever. So we'd go and Dom would play the calm guy.
Yeah.
We'd play good cop, bad cop, but he wouldn't play the psycho.
Yeah.
He'd play the calm, like, let's sit down and talk about it guy. I'm the one that would be like threatening to do this and breaking up that and throwing this off the table and, you know, going in the middle of service. And Dom was the chill one. But
What sort of fish market was this, Ross?
this was a fish market. It's a long story, but like
It sounds like a long story.
It is, but long story short, I did an off-Broadway play with a guy and Antonio Oliveri, and he came from Sicilian fishermen who had a store in Manhattan and a store in Queens, and a store in Brooklyn. And his father was a sweetheart, would feed the neighborhood, super nice guy. And restaurants would owe him money. They'd get slow and they wouldn't pay him. And he'd be, this guy owed him $5,000. This guy owed him $10,000. This guy owed him $3,000, you know, and he couldn't get the money. And I was like, listen, I can get the money for you. Like, you know, I'll get, and he gave me 50% of what I could collect plus fish. And I would eat in his basement. And like, you know, they just became, that's another story of my own life that I had this whole thing going, but I brought Dom into it for some time. And what was funny was nobody knew who was sitting across from them.
Right.
Nobody knew that this guy was who he was. They just thought, you know, I was this crazy character and I had this guy with me. And
that's hysterical, man.
And it was hysterical. And the truth is we made a lot of allies, and sometimes we did so well that the guy that I collected from would be like, can you collect for me? I got people over there owe me money too, you know?
That's
like
so funny.
It
I used
fun.
to do that I used to work for these Sicilian guys, S&V Ironworks in the Bronx on East 233rd Street in the Bronx. Sal and Vinny Ironworks. And Sal was a Sicilian man. And I used to, I was his job estimators at the ironwork company, but he would have me do collections for him, like for people that owed him. So I would have to go into their offices physically. They're like, oh, somebody's physically coming here in person. I guess now we got to pay.
Exactly. exactly.
Even though it was just totally legitimate. Like Sal just had a ironworks company. There was really nothing nefarious about it. He just needed to send me to have people write checks because people weren't picking up their phone and stuff like that.
Yeah, sometimes you got to incentivize them, you know.
You got to incentivize them, you know.
Yeah. When I would show up in the middle of service and demand money, they would get incentivized. It would work.
Yeah,
I always said I had a lot of really great acting roles in real life.
I see that. Yeah. Well, that's what's also interesting about the story too. That aside from all the other mob stuff, just like New York back in the day, and just like the whole element of how life was back in the day in general was just like fascinating. And I think that always just lends itself to like countless stories as well.
For sure, man.
So moving on to the second segment of the podcast where I asked each guest for two of their favorite movie scenes. Ross wanted to bring up a scene from Blade Runner, which I love Blade Runner. I love Ridley Scott. And I guess I'll let you talk about it, Ross.
Yeah, I mean, that's that last scene on the rooftop, that speech about how all his memories will be lost like tears in rain, you know, and the things that he'd seen, you know, starships burning off the coasts of Orion or whatever. You know, I forget the whole monologue, but like, you know, he goes through this monologue and then he's like, time to die. And just the kind of, you know, existential thing that you know, dealing with life and meeting your maker and it being finite and not having enough time and not knowing when we're going to die. I just thought the poetry of Blade Runner, from the script to its inception to everything about the way it was shot and the performances, is got to be one of the top greatest movies I've ever seen.
It's so great. Yeah.
It's impeccable.
Early Ridley Scott film, but it obviously still holds up so well. For people not familiar with it, obviously, you know, most people in the podcast have seen Blade Runner, but set in futuristic Los Angeles, where synthetic humans called replicants are created to do dangerous work off-world, but some of them escape and return to Earth, which is illegal. And the main character, Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, is basically a bounty hunter tasked with tracking them down and retiring them, which means killing them. So at the end of the film, this scene is with Rutger Hauer, and he's hunting the last and most dangerous replicant, which is Roy Batty. And it's just I heard that Rutger Hauer actually improvised some of that dialogue, like the tears in the rain, you know?
I heard that too. And the thing is, the replicants come back to try to find out who made them and how they could get more life, because they were only made to live a certain amount of time.
Yes.
And so their whole mission is like, how can we find a way to meet the guy that made us and get more time? And they meet him and he's like, I can't give you more time. And then he kills his maker, and that whole scene. I mean, so
more human than human.
Yep.
Yeah. Incredible film. And when I was rewatching the scene in preparation for our discussion, it was just like the cinematography of it was just incredible too. Yeah. It was just like, and I didn't realize they shot it in real rain. Apparently, I was reading up on that. Like, it was really raining. It wasn't like manufactured rain.
Wow. It's cool.
Super incredible. So the next one is from Godfather Part 2, which I love Godfather Part 2. It's my favorite film of all time. Still holds the #1 spot after all these years. It was probably the movie that got me wanting to make movies, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just how the film weaves back and forth in time, from Al Pacino's character playing Michael Corleone to the young Vito Corleone, and how he's coming up, played by Robert De Niro. And I guess I'll set the context that in the neighborhood, there's a figure named Finucci who's essentially extorting money from people, including Vito Corleone and his friends. And Robert De Niro's character is essentially getting extorted from him, like, and his friends are. And instead of continuing to pay him, Vito makes a decision, a very calculated one, to take control of the situation. And I guess I'll let you talk about the scene itself.
So what I love is, for me, this scene starts where he's sharing some pasta in his very humble apartment with two of his buddies, and he tells them, "Listen, you know, he's got guns, we got guns. Why do we got to pay this guy? Like, I don't understand." They're like, "No, you can't. You know, he's this, he's that," and he's like, "Oh, if he's listen, if he's such a tough guy, let me handle it. I'm gonna take care of it. Let me do what I got to do. You know, and just remember I did this favor for you guys." And they're just like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" And he's like, they're like, "What are you gonna do?" And he's like, "Don't worry what I'm gonna do. That's my business. Just remember I took care of this situation, you know, and like that. Are we good?" And it's all in Italian, by the way, this conversation. And I love that whole conversation. I love the reactions of his friends, but they're finally like, all right. So, you know, he meets him down at the festival. I don't know if it was San Gennaro or which one it was. And he collects like $50 from each of them. He's like, "I'll go meet with Fanucci." And he goes and gives the guy like a quarter of what he was asking for. And the guy's just like, "You got balls to you know, like to short me." And he's like, "Yeah, you know, whatever. We're a little, you know, shy, but don't worry, we'll get it to you." And he's just setting him up. And so he walks out, and now there's this shot. And De Niro goes up on top of the rooftops, and Fanucci is walking through the festival, and we see him walking through the don of the neighborhood, you know, shaking hands, putting money on the Madonna, you know,
In his white suit.
he's in a white suit. Yeah. And you're panning that shot, and then simultaneously you go and you pan from up above and you see De Niro walking over rooftops till he gets to Fanucci's building, and he grabs the gun that he's stashed. He goes down in the hallway and he turns out the light bulb, and he wraps his gun with a towel to muffle the noise, you know. And Fanucci comes up the stairs and like sees the lights out. He goes to hit the light, and then De Niro steps out of the shadows, and he's like, and you know, and he basically shoots him in the chest, takes his money back, walks home, sits on the stoop with his family, you know, and that's kind of the end of the chapter. And we understand how, you know, Vito Corleone came to power in the neighborhood. And you know, I'm sure you can agree, like everything about the way it's shot, right? The framing of it, and just the action and the whole nine yards, the music, it's all just fucking perfect cinema. Like
It's
it's just
exquisite. Yeah, it's perfect cinema. And
Yep.
even the way that the gun is wrapped around a towel and it catches fire, and like that's like a unique thing, and like
Yep.
the turning of the lamp and the look of shock on Fanucci's face. I think there's like a complete look of utter shock that this just happened to him as it's
Yeah.
happening. You know, that's a
Yeah.
moment that is really striking too.
Absolutely. And you know, morally, for me, when I saw that as a kid, I remember thinking to myself, that's how you deal with bullies. Like that's how you deal with somebody fucking with you.
Yeah.
You lull them into a place where they think that you're not harmful, and then you just take them out,
Yeah.
you know?
100%.
And I thought that was just a good moral kind of story for life about how to deal with somebody that's trying to take something from you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ross, I really appreciate you being on the podcast tonight. I'm excited to check out your work in the future, and, you know, keep supporting your stuff. And, you know, I guess, is there anywhere where people could follow along with you, or?
You know, Zeph, I mean, honestly, the documentary exists on Amazon Prime, so anybody can see it on their TV, which is great. We have a distribution deal with Xenon Pictures, so the film's out. Like
The
you know,
Linchpin of Bensonhurst. Check it out.
The Linchpin of Bensonhurst.
That's where
Everybody
I
can
saw
go
it.
see it on their TV tonight. Go to Amazon, put Linchpin of Bensonhurst, watch the movie. But if you want to see the outtakes, go to Dominic Montiglio, The Life on YouTube, and that's where you could see the long clips, the unedited versions, and all the different kind of stuff that we got into that didn't make the movie. And I'm telling you, Zeph, especially because you're interested, like, you know, there's a whole thing where we did this thing at a woman's house in Long Island where we painted and stayed at the house for a while, and Dom ran out of his meds and we had to go find his medication and stuff. And there's a lot of these type of interactions where you see my relationship with Dom, and it'll give you some real deep insight to like him and I and kind of what we went through together. There's a lot of interesting stuff on there. If you ever want to just like take a deep dive into Dominic Montiglio, I'd say go to Dominic Montiglio The Life and check it out.
I'm definitely going to check that out. And one thing that I want to add that I think I also really appreciated about your documentary is it's not like you're glamorizing that life at all. Like you're definitely showing the consequences of the life. It's, you know, it's not like you're putting that sort of lifestyle in any kind of pedestal. You're saying, hey, this is how the cookie crumbled and it's really fucked up and there's a lot of consequences there, you know?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that, Zeph, because let me tell you something. What I learned, the toughest guys, they're all dead or in jail doing life.
Yeah.
And I used to say to Dom, and I think it's in the doc, but it's definitely in one of our outtakes. I was like, Dom, when you break it down, let's say you were a gangster really doing your crazy shit for like 8 years. I don't know, maybe 10 tops, right? Before it all went to shit and witness protection and all the bullshit that happened and your uncle tried to kill you in jail. But I was like, and so even if you're driving the Maserati and you got hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're banging hot penthouse pets and all that shit, it's all borrowed. I mean, no gangster gets to keep it. You all get arrested. You all get taken out. Either you get shot or you get put in jail for the rest of your life. Like, it's definitely not a glamorous thing. And it's definitely goes back to the Bronx Tale where it's like, you know, that whole thing where he's like, you know, the working man's a sucker, you know, and it's like, no, your dad's the tough guy.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's true. The working guy is the toughest guy because the working guy that's got to actually fucking buckle down and suck it up and go to fucking work and deal with that shit and have a boss and have people he's got to be nice to when he doesn't and show up on time and do all the things that a working guy has to do rather than just try to rob it from somebody else. You know?
I'm with you, man. 100%. Couldn't agree more.
Thing, man. So
yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Film Situation podcast with your host, Seth Cotter.